How's it? Welcome back to Bez's Garage, where we're in part 8 today of Billy Bob's Backyard Budget Bill in the Bay of Plenty. And I've been away on holiday for a couple of weeks, so that's why it's taken me a while to get another video up there. I've got a short one for you today, just about the engine. So with the engine, what I've done is I've completely cleaned all the parts up, stripped it right down. I showed you a little bit about the governor last time, so what we can do is we can have a look here. This is the actual governor here. I've now removed the steel pieces, so that is the bit that's going to go back into the engine again, and that's going to be the oil slipper that goes in and splashes the oil up that you need to stop the engine from seizing. So the other thing we'll have a look at is I clean everything up as best I possibly can. I've honed the bore on this, so if you have a look inside the engine there, you will hopefully get to see the crosshatch pattern, which means that I've honed the bore. It takes out all the slight high spots and the yucky bits in there so that the new rings can bed in better. So I've honed the bore and cleaned everything up. On the top of here you can see the valves. I've recut the valve seats, so you need special cutters to cut those. So I cut the valve seats again, and I've cleaned everything out on the inside. So what I find the best thing to clean out the inside is this thing here. It's called a Dremel, and then I use a little wire wheel that goes around the end of it. So I bought a packet of about sort of, I don't know, 10 of them that came from AliExpress, Wish, those great websites. I think it was about $5 or $10 for 10 of them. So I use those all the time for cleaning out. Great for getting in, giving a clean, polishing around the place, just makes it nice and clean. You want to clean it out as best as you can, just so that it's going to look nicer and work better. So when it comes to cleaning up these other surfaces, like the cylinder head and those sort of things, it's really important to get that nice and clean, so that when we've got this lovely, clean new gasket here to go on, we make sure that it seals properly. So what I did was 34 years ago when I started my apprenticeship, I made this little gadget here. So all it is a piece of steel with a couple of taps threaded into it, and I get a bit of emery tape. I put the emery tape on there, put the emery tape into there, tighten up the screws, and then basically you have a flat piece of sandpaper that you can put on here and you can rub back and forward, and what it does is enables you to get a nice flat clean surface. So you can see that there's still a couple of marks left in here from it hasn't quite 100%, but I'm pretty happy with that. So it takes it all nice and clean. I've also done it on the side here, so it's nice and clean. And if you look at the cylinder head here, we've done the same thing, where we've just got this piece here, gone back and forward on here, and then we've got the wire wheel and we've cleaned it all out, so it's all nice and clean. It just, obviously, when it was pulled apart there was carbon and stuff everywhere, so it's just nice and clean. It'll work better now. So with the valves, so I said I'd cut the seats in here. What I've also done with the valves is I've recut the valves themselves. So there's a special machine it goes into and it sets up the 45-degree angle, and you just recut the seats so you know it's going to seal. Then what you do is you grab your lapping paste, which this is old sort of stuff, lapping paste. You put a bit on the valves, you put it in there, spin it around with a spinny bit until you get a nice little line that comes right around. I'm not sure whether you can see that line on there, but there's a nice little line that you can see come up on the edge, and when it goes all nicely all around, it means that the valves are nicely sealed. Okay, so it's an old school way of checking that they're all good. Now the other thing I've done is with the valves, I used to have these horrible bloody collet things here that I don't really like them that much. That usually goes onto the valve, clicks through there and then slides in there. I just don't like them that much, so I tend to throw them away, and I get another one of these, which is the same as what's on the other valve. Put the collets on, and I know it's not the right valve, but they tend to work quite well. So you can just put the collet on there. We'll put both collets on. In fact, we'll just show you how it works. So we'll slide this on first, put the two collets on, slide this up here, and then it holds the valve in there with the spring underneath here. I just think it's a better way of holding it than that horrible little thing that goes in there. If the RPM gets a bit high, this can vibrate out, and if it vibrates out, then you end up with valves hitting pistons and going through heads, so we don't want to do that. So that's what I do. The other thing to notice over here is we talk about putting springs on and putting washers underneath. So this is a washer. I'm going to put it underneath here. It just gives that spring a little bit more tension. Now you've got to be really careful when you do this, because if the washer's too thick, when you open up the valve and the valve spring touches completely, it gets what they call bound, it can break things. So you've got to make sure that you get that right, so that when the cam is fully open, that the spring is not fully compressed and you end up breaking things that way. So a little bit of mucking around. This is just little tweaks that you can do to hopefully make the valve seal better and get away from the valve bounce. Sometimes you can get it slightly higher RPM. So that's what we've done with the valves. So they're all cut, they're ready to go back in, all lapped, all sorted there. We've got new rings, so I've got new rings here. The new rings, and there's a special order, and they give you a nice little bit of paper there. You know, the special order they've got to go in at. They've got to go around the right way to make them work. Now there's a couple of tricks when you put the the rings in. You've got to make sure they're the right way round. Cover them with oil, and you need you need a ring compressor to compress them to put them in there correctly. So a little bit of a trick with doing that. Whenever you're doing any assembly in the engine, I always use something like this, which is just a good installation tool, heavy duty oil stabilizer. It's the same as the Lucas or the Winsdoer product. It's very similar. It's just when you assemble it, it sticks to everything, and it means the first start up you're not going to get horrible wear. So the piston we've all cleaned up. The other thing to note with the piston is that these grooves need to be all cleaned out. And you need to make sure that the rings fit nicely into here and they're not too tight and not too loose. So important to check that as well. This is a little dog bone that sits in the bottom. Some people replace these because they think they break or whatever. I've never had one break on an engine for me, but yeah, it doesn't add any performance to changing this, so there's no drama with changing that. So that's what that all looks like. The other thing we'll just quickly talk about is the crankshaft here. So what I like to do with the crankshaft and the flywheel is I like to match this taper to the taper that's on the flywheel. So in the flywheel here is another taper, and this taper should match the two together. What I like to do is to get our paste, get a bit of this paste, get it out of here, stick it on the crank. You don't need a lot of it. Stick it on the crank, and then you get this and you stick it inside there. And you basically just give it a bit of a spin, and you can do this, I don't know, as much as you sort of feel you need to really. What we're currently doing is it's like lapping in the valves, and it means that the flywheel will end up getting a really nice perfect fit against the rest of it. So you can see it's starting to go grey, which means that we're getting quite a nice fitting between the two pieces. Now, the advantage of this is that when you bolt it down, it grabs a lot tighter, and so when you've got the little tiny wee keyway, which sits in here, now they can shear and cause you problems. And the other thing people do is they replace these with offset ones so you can advance the timing. So if you do your lapping of the cylinder, the lapping of the crank to the flywheel, there's less load on this, because as you tighten it down, it's such a good match that it seals quite nicely. Another good thing to remember is when you're assembling the engine and you've got the crankshaft and you put it into the block, you put the piston on and get it to exactly top dead center. Put the flywheel on this side. I grab the flywheel and put it onto here. And then what I like to do is I like to mark where top dead center is. So with this turned around, the piston's going to be perfectly flush. It's not going to move either way. And then I'll put a mark on this, and I'll put a mark on the block. I then know where top dead center is, so that when I've got the engine running, I can then get my timing light. I can check where the timing is, and if I want to, I can adjust it one way or the other by an offset keyway. Okay. Some people have adjustable flywheels, and the same sort of thing can be done. It just means that you sacrifice maybe some low end for some high end torque. Yeah, you got to play around with it depending on how the engine goes, but just a little trick that you can try. Obviously you don't want to go too far because you'll end up blowing up the engine, so it's one of those things that you've got to play around with. So everything's looking nice and clean. Got a long weekend coming up, so all going well, we might get to put this all together this weekend and maybe get it back in. Oh, I just forgot one other thing. Hang on a second. I've just got this little device that's turned up here. So this is a new carburetor that I've got for it. Quite a cool looking little carburetor, not very expensive. I got it off Trade Me. So that carburetor is what we're going to use on this engine. Obviously I'm going to have to jet it and get it set up for this engine, but that's half of the fun of what we're doing anyway. So once we've got it up and running, it'll just be less of a faultless system where we'll end up with good flow. The other interesting thing with this carburetor is it has an accelerator pump. And I haven't seen one of these on a lot of the normal carburetors. The beauty of that is that when you accelerate, it squirts a bit of fuel into the throat, which means it doesn't go lean as soon as you accelerate. So I'm hoping that by putting this on here, we'll get away from the flat spot we sometimes get on the acceleration, and it should run quite nicely. So I've almost forgot about that. So that's about all the little tricks we've got today. That's probably a plenty long enough video. So once again, thanks for joining me at Baz's Garage. If you have any questions about assembling the engine or anything you're not sure about, just hit me up, send me a personal message. Don't forget to subscribe so we can get more subscribers. And cheers for turning up.